Hi, Rafi. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Stephanie. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let me get Noreen on the screen as well.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Okay, so we've got Noreen and Stephanie. So we're just waiting for Marie to get in. And once she's here, you will be complete. Oh, there she is. Okay. So she should be popping on screen shortly. She's probably turning on her camera and audio as we speak. And we know that a significant number of child care providers left the business, and so there's long waiting lists even for those who can afford it.
Oh, I've lost you guys.
How do the prior sessions wrap up? Do they just cut off, or you all give them a 5-minute warning?
So I'm sorry, say that again.
How do the sessions prior to this one cut off? And
well, yeah, that's why actually I couldn't hear you because I'm listening to one of them right now. They're all still going. They all were advised that they should have basically 30 to 35 minutes for their breakouts max. And the second group, so your group is scheduled to start, looks like it's 5:11 p.m. Eastern. So
okay.
in about 9 to 10 minutes. So at that point, you'll start to see people coming in. The way that you can tell who's in the room is if on the right side where it says people, you see that tab? If you click on that, you'll see who's in the room. So technically right now, it's just you and Marie who are in the room. I think Noreen may have stepped out. So she'll probably come back. But Marie is technically here. Just don't see her right now. And just make sure that she doesn't need assistance.
And I had a change in location, so there's no way to put up a different background, correct?
Unfortunately, Hopin doesn't support like virtual backgrounds, so you'd literally have to move. But you have time. You do have time to move. And Noreen's back. Great.
Sorry, I'm not sure what happened.
No worries. All right, let me just make sure. Because Marie is in the room. We just need to get her on the screen. So we're going to be facing those needs. So I want us as a nation to put together policies to address those, because we can address the housing, education, and child care gaps that particularly affect. So Noreen, I was telling Stephanie that the way you can tell who's currently in the breakout room is if you click on that people tab on the right, you can see a list of the names, and those are the people who are in the room. And if you look up at the top, next to the eyeball, there's a number, currently says 10. That also tells you how many people are here right now. So people are starting to filter in. They can see and hear us. And we can chat with them if we'd like in the chat. But if you just click chat.
And I agree with the, one of the things.
Okay, we see you on.
I heard yesterday.
We see you. I think it's just, remember that button.
And they refer to it as
the hold on, let me
caring for your children. How are you going to care?
Give me a second. I'm going to.
And how are you going to care for the behavioral health as well? So I love that how they wrap that up.
Hi, Gwen.
Now,
hello.
To be addressed for the workforce and for women, because that was a huge issue and problem and still remains.
Marie is here in the breakout room. We're just waiting for her to get on screen.
When they've got that.
I may not know to ask.
Rafi, I'm on with
Joyce.
Marie. And her button's not working.
Oh, her share audio video button?
Share audio and video. Correct.
Okay, could you ask her to refresh her page and then click it again
your
and
page.
see what happens?
So important to all of us, especially to women. But I'm gonna switch it around a little bit because my industry, early intervention, which provides services to developmentally disabled babies and toddlers, mainly in homes, we attract women. These fields are speech pathology.
Noreen, don't you have a big thing tomorrow or today?
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, great.
Communication has been established.
I can tell you, I come from a technological background, and I know yelling into the screen doesn't work, but I was trying it.
Darn it.
And it was not working, as it never does.
It feels good, though. I'm jumping off stage. I just want to make sure that you amazing people got there. You're going to be on stage. Rafi's going to tell you when to start. There's been about 50 to 80 people. People have been active in the chat, and you're all amazing. You all look gorgeous, and I'm just glad everyone made it here, and it was relatively smooth. So have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gwen.
Thank you.
Now,
Hi, Marie.
come on. When we do the polls, we just click on the poll, or that's all we
Right.
do?
So you can click on polls right there. You should see them if you click on polls. It should say only visible to you. Do you see that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So you're the only one. You and I are the only ones who can see that right now. So once you're ready to make them visible, you click on the 3 dots next to it, and it'll say unhide.
Okay.
You can unhide it. There are 2 there. If you scroll down, your second one is there.
Will I be able to see the result? I'll be able to see the results of the poll like everybody else at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so Marie, if you look at the top of the screen next to that eyeball there's currently 21 people in the room.
Okay.
And you can also tell who they are.
And they can't hear us just yet, right?
They can see us and hear us. So they're all in here. You can click on the people tab to see who it is.
Okay,
And you
well,
can also...
I love them all and I respect them all. Delighted they're joining.
So you're welcome to begin whenever you'd like, and I'll be in the room, but I'll be on mute.
Okay, are we all set here?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I know it's the end of the day, and it really attests to the importance of the, resolving the pay gap, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. So we're going to have a very good session today. Let's just walk you through it. I'm Marie Konstance, and let me tell you what I do. I manage the Gender and Diversity KPI Alliance. We're a group founded by Catalyst and chaired by Catalyst and Ceramont. Our goal is to have all companies measure representation and pay in their talent pipelines, because you can't manage what you don't measure. The GDKA asks only that companies measure representation on the board, representation by employment category, and pay ratio by employment category. We have almost 90 supporters since we started last year, and we join in regular meetings to share best practices. Today I have a great panel, and we're joined by Noreen Farrell. Noreen Farrell is the Executive Director of Equal Rights Advocates. It's one of the nation's leading legal nonprofits advocating for women and girls at work and school. Noreen is also the chair of the National Equal Pay Day Today campaign. She works with hundreds of organizations across the country closing the gender and race pay gap. Noreen will talk about how pay equity fits in with the overall wealth equation for women workers, why it matters, and leading the best corporate trends to close the gap. Stephanie Gore, and Stephanie has the best title I've ever heard. She is a transformation director with KPMG. She leads large-scale technical and policy transformation for government clients. She leads from a customer experience perspective, so it includes journey maps to enable adoption through end-to-end implementation. Stephanie will give us an in-depth perspective of how KPMG uses measurement to ensure the workplace is fair and can attract the best talent. Before we turn to the panelists, let's take a few minutes to outline the stubborn and persistent problem that women earn less than men. In other words, there's a pay gap. The pay gap means that the median pay for all women is lower than the median pay for all men. And this is in every industry, in every country, every region, every level of education. In the US, that's 82 cents on the dollar that men make. Now, let's talk about what that really is. I think it's important in this conversation to really talk about what measurement terms and be very precise about them. Now, the main reason that women make less than men is that they're in jobs that make less money. That's the bottom line. There are fewer women in well-paying jobs. Only 28% of women CEOs, there's only 28% of women that are CEOs, 16% of all engineers and architects are women, 41% of doctors, 37% of lawyers. Women tend to be in the lower paying jobs. So they're in jobs that aren't paid well and jobs that are maybe not treated as well. And we can go into a lot of reasons for that, but we'll hold that for another day. So some of this is due to discrimination in hiring. And some of it's due to the things we all know about, that women do a lot more of the caring, they do a lot more of the domestic work. Workplaces are not necessarily flexible and helpful to let women accommodate these needs. And also, women sometimes take time out of the workplace, and that can really be holding you back from corporate advancement. Not saying it's the wrong decision, I'm just saying that that's the financial repercussions of it. Now, here's the other part of this issue. When women are doing the exact same job as men, are they paid the same? So apples to apples, are women paid the same as men for similar work? Well, it looks like they're not. That's a smaller part of the pay gap, but it is a persistent part of the pay gap. From what we know, it's probably in the single digits. We don't have that precisely. The government estimates these numbers. When they look at pay gap numbers, they compare all women CEOs to each other, even if they have different, companies under them, or all doctors, and not accounting for the fact that women may be more general practitioners than the well-paying surgeons. So we don't know what the number is, but we think it's in the single digits. Now that obviously is unfair, and it's also illegal. There's been laws on the books since the 1960s that you can't discriminate on gender or race in payment practices, but it persists and it has to be eradicated. Now, the nice thing is that companies are doing something about this. And what they're doing is something called a pay equity analysis. So pay equity, as we said before, is apples to apples comparisons of jobs. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how companies do this if you're not familiar with it. What they do is first define what similar jobs are. So they'll make something like, engineer level 12 or HR representative level 16. And they'll decide for each of those jobs what the pay range should be for that job. Now, there's always reasons people get paid differently in those different jobs. And as long as they're fair, that's fine. So they'll look at the fair factors that might determine why people are paid differently. So some of these could be location, performance, maybe some specialized training. So now they know what the job should pay, and now they know why people would be paid differently in it. And every year they do an analysis called a Pay Equity Audit. And the Pay Equity Audit looks at those factors and looks at the jobs and then says, are anybody in these jobs being underpaid? And let me tell you from what people tell me, every year there's a lot of people being underpaid. There's always problems to fix. There's very often it's women, or who are being underpaid or underrepresented groups, but it could also be white men too. It goes across the board, and it's a consistent problem. But companies that are on top of this do the analysis, they fix the problems, and then address them next year when hiring and promotion creates new issues, and they have to resolve those as well. Now, it would be great to say all companies do this. And I hope, that's one of our goals in life in the GDKA is to get everybody to do a pay equity audit. But it's quite a few companies who do, and they're seeing this as a competitive advantage. First of all, the important reason people do this is it attracts and retains talent. People tell me, particularly younger people joining the workforce, they want to see that you have fair pay practices. They want to see that there's sincere, important diversity efforts in place. The other reason companies do this is for risk mitigation. It's against the law to not pay people fairly, and nobody wants that kind of problem or the reputational damage that causes. So doing this is a good risk protection process. And finally, companies have corporate values, and many companies say, this is a value of ours. We want to treat people fairly. We want to get the best talent, and we want to treat them all the same, the way they should be treated. So we see this being adopted across the board. Now, I am going to be brave. I am going to use technology here, and we are going to try to do our first poll. Let's see if this works. Okay, I have a poll, and I'm going to do these. I do his magic thing here that unhides my poll. Does everybody see it? I can't hear you, but I'm hoping you can.
I see it.
Okay, good. So I ask you to fill this out. It's all in confidence. We want to get a feeling for how many people do a pay equity audit, and then we'll share the results with all. It's interesting looking at this. Let me show the results. I'm not surprised that a lot of you don't know. The funny thing about pay equity audit, a lot of companies do all this good work. They spend a lot of money, time, effort, and energy, and they don't know how to message it. So there's more people doing this than you would think. I have one company I'm speaking to about the Gender and Diversity KPI Alliance, and they're saying, we measure pay, but I don't know whether we want to tell anyone. So this is a common thing. So you may be doing it and you don't know. So let's go to the next panel, the next poll, to see if you're doing it, why you're doing it. Okay, I think I've magically unhidden a poll. Okay, you can all see the results, and you pretty much have it, all pretty much equal. So I think it's hard to untwine these things. People tend to do this for several good reasons. Yep, we got a lot of several good reasons.
Say no votes for fairness alone.
Well,
it's
yeah.
Several reasons. It's bundled.
But we hope in their hearts that they are being fair or care about it. Okay, why don't we turn now to Noreen? And Noreen, why don't you talk a little bit about this? You can give us your thoughts on the poll, what you're seeing, and just in general, how the wealth gap matters and what companies are doing about it.
Yeah, it's so great to be here. I work with workers and organizations and companies across the country. I've been doing this work for over 20 years. And what I found is, so many, I think probably if we could all say all of these, we would say all of these. There is, in so many ways, our corporate partners have led the way in terms of not just following the law, which is our risk mitigation number that you're seeing there, but leading the law, because they understand that their workers are more likely to stay and be happy if they feel like there's general fairness. So I do think fairness is implicit in all of these. What I would say is, you mentioned, how many people do audits, and I thought I would just share with you the stats on it. Just big Harvard Business Review study that came out, and it said that looking at the largest, 922 of the largest U.S. companies found only 22% performed a salary audit between 2016 and 2020. And in my experience, and including I'm employer of my own nonprofit with 25 employees, we really you cannot see what you don't measure. And so I'm really appreciative, Marie, of your emphasis on the audits. And I just, and I think that when you're looking at pay, and this is why it's great to have Stephanie on this panel as well, income equality is such a key component of, how we're doing economically in this country, but also we have to think about the impact and the role of income on overall wealth. So in terms of why pay equity matters, it's just such an important part of overall wealth. And wealth is your assets minus your debts. And, obviously, if your income is depressed, for all the reasons you mentioned, Marie, not just unequal pay for equal work, but because you're forced out of the workplace, you don't have adequate childcare, you don't have job protected paid leave, it depresses your overall earnings. But those also have to be balanced against student loan debt, a lack of a pension, retirement savings, all of these things that create debt and really make income all the more important. And so as you hear from Stephanie, it's really important to think about this big picture when you're thinking about your compensation policy. Also be thinking about your wealth policy. And if you're struggling in terms of where to start with an audit, there's some really great recommendations. And I'm just going to use the balance of my time talking about really exciting trends that I'm hearing. And just so you know, just in case it's not clear to you, I don't know about, I'm sure in the corporate world is very, very much like the nonprofit world. There is talent wars, as you mentioned, Marie, happening. And nearly 3 in 5 employees won't work at a company with an equity pay gap. And so, it's very motivating, especially in this post-COVID world where there's a lot more options in terms of where people work, remote, otherwise, that pay transparency, pay equity is a key driver of retaining talent. And so the great trends we're seeing in terms of you want to take that first step, take a sample size audit. I talk to businesses with, 50,000 employees and, they're just kind of getting this started, and don't, say your next year is you're going to take some sample departments, you're going to do your pay equity, you're going to figure out what, where are, I talked to one company where they realized that their job titles were not aligned. So a company like Gap, they've had the same job titles forever, and their pay gap analysis was very straightforward. But some companies, I work with a lot of tech companies where HR are called happiness engineers. And so just taking a moment to line up what people do as compared to what their job titles is an important component. So do a small scale test run is the way that a lot of the companies that are getting it right started. And then, I always recommend that you just have to continue doing your spot checks. Especially as we're all in this big hiring mode, many of us, you just have to continuously be testing your data and spot checks. It's a maintenance issue. It's not a avoiding liability lawsuit. No, it's just a maintenance issue because things happen and audits help you even it out, to your point, Marie. I think that an exciting trend that really relates to that stat I said about employee retention is the pay transparency. And I just want to say that as an employer, it was a little bit, and I have advocated for pay transparency. And then I looked at my own workplace and said, yeah, we have to post our salary scale for every job that we put out there. And I realized, wow, I can't test the market then. And all the things that I would do about not posting, I just had to find other ways to really make sure that I was competitive. And some of it is sometimes getting feedback from candidates saying, FYI, this person is paying more for the same position, and then you adjust your salaries. But at least you put it out there as a scale with very clear objective criteria about where you fall on the scale and why. And there's great companies like Starbucks is doing that. GoDaddy is a company that actually provides pay scales. They don't do it publicly for competitive reasons, but on every person's paycheck, they put the scale for their position. And so it welcomes a conversation from employees about, why they are where they are on the scale. There's other great companies that are posting all positions and their salaries in their annual report. Buffer is a company that's had great pay transparency policies. They have a very specific salary formula that anyone can use to calculate their salary based on a lot of the objective factors that you talked about, Marie. And I think it really helps people see that disparities aren't necessarily because of sex or race or ethnicity, but they might be because of something else. Whole Foods, you can look up the salary of any colleague. They have a directory. And they can, it's an insider stuff. So you can only get it if you're an actual employee, but you can access everyone's salaries. So if anybody has wants to see some of these policies and links to where they're at and explore them for your company, please do. I mean, look, this policy went into effect before it became subsumed by Amazon. And even then Whole Foods had 90,000 employees. So it's really just a great example of large scale pay transparency. And I think, look, if you aren't transparent about your pay, your employers may out you. We saw, the underground spreadsheet from Google where, 1,200 employees, which was 2% of Google's workforce, published salaries, and that act revealed pay inequities between men and women. So, I really think that moving forward in the next 5 years, lack of pay transparency is at your own peril. I mean, look, the generations of people after me, they're used to going to Glassdoor. They're used to going, the idea of pay secrecy is not only prohibited in 7 to 10 states right now, but it's also just the trend and the culture shift in terms of our workplace. And then I'd love to close by just saying, think about these other wealth building initiative. Think about your paid leave and paid sick time policies that really ensure that women and mothers and caregivers can stay in the workplace despite having to care for family, especially a big lesson learned coming out of COVID. Look at your childcare subsidies. Look at the equity that you're offering people as a total compensation policy package. So there's a lot of options. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to know more, and great examples to follow in your own company.
Well, thank you so much for that. You really got to, a good understanding of all the different exciting developments going on with all these companies. It's nice to hear. I want to dive right now into KPMG, which is a terrific company, a great proponent of DEI measurement and member of the GDKA. And Stephanie's going to tell us more about how this works in her own organization and what the results are. And then I noticed that some of you have questions, and I hope we can get to them because there's interesting questions about pay and representation that we'll try to address if we have a moment here. Stephanie?
Great. Good afternoon. And for those of you who are not familiar with KPMG, we are comprised of audit, advisory, and tax all in one firm. We have 33,000 employees and growing. And we do, from a pay equity standpoint, have a process, and they're becoming more surgical and much more intentional about the process. But we have some recent gains that I'm going to tell you about, and then based on our transparency, and I'll put the report in the chat, you can Google it. We do have a transparency report out there on our workforce and where we've had gains and where we have a long way to go. But from a specific parity pay equity process, we have mid-year and annual review process. At that point, that's when you everyone's coached. You ask the question, where do I fall in the pay band? So the ranges that's out there. You're in the bottom 25%, top 25%, or the middle range. So that's becoming a more normal conversation that really didn't exist even 2 or 3 years ago. So that's part of the accountability process. And we have another, and then we found that from between men and women, things are really leveling out. Now, let me give you some statistics to bring this to bear. So I mentioned 33,000 partners and employees, and our female numbers are trending up. So women now represent 46% of the workforce, where a couple of years ago it was 44%. So every year we're getting towards the equity and just the talent. Now, when you look at demographics, you see a different story. So out of that entire 33,000, 66% are white, 18% Asian, 7% are Hispanic, 6% Black, and 2% other. Many of these represent gains from prior years. So there's progress, but the company's we're not satisfied with that level. They want to accelerate and go further, faster, and we have some really hard goals that we're trying to reach by 2025. Therefore, in the diversity and inclusion report, in the link, if you Google it, there's a lot of talk about Accelerate 2025. So we do acknowledge the deficits, we acknowledge the gains and the deficits, and are taking some very proactive steps to get underrepresented minorities in the C-suite and gaining traction in their career throughout the company. Currently, right now, if you look at the C-suite positions like my position, managing director and partner, we represent on average about 2 to 4% of the population, which is not where we want to be long term. So we're taking some tangible steps to fix that. Looking at the data, acknowledging those strengths and weaknesses. But we have 4 pillars to our plan, which was implemented last year. And recruitment, development and advancement, experience and retention, and transparency and accountability. The transparency and accountability, I've been with the firm over a decade. The levels of transparency now are significantly stronger than they've been. So there's definitely action behind the words and the plan, and the tone at the top at the company is amazing right now, because every leader is talking about Accelerate 2025, how it fits into our strategy. We know the economics of diversity, going to our clients and solving problems and solutions in the market we are the gains and the benefits and the financial benefits of taking a diverse team to market far outweigh sending a team of just one gender to the table to solve problems. So I'll give some examples, and I want to make sure we leave time for questions. But as far as accelerating diversity, recruitment is one pillar. We've always had a robust recruitment program, and we have select targeted schools and HBCUs. We've expanded our HBCU presence in other schools that we can get underrepresented minorities in the pipeline sooner. We had an amazing Embark program this year where we had hundreds of talent come in for an externship. They got to spend a week in audit, a week in advisory, and a week in tax, and be immersed in projects and get experience directly working with those engagement teams. I had two Embark interns for a week, and it was hard to let them go. What they did in a week on my engagement was outstanding, and I hope I can hire them for my teams next year. So that kind of exposure and program, we took a different non-traditional approach to us being exposed to different talent and from different schools, as well as them getting exposure to our entire firm. Development and advancement. We've always had a very robust training and immersive training program where our employees must get at least 40 CPE per year, either internally through our advisory university or equivalent programs, or getting an external certification. But one of the other things that made a big difference this year, we have hundreds of mentor circles. For example, me and another partner, we have a group of 15 mentees, and every month we have a turnkey discussion. One of the discussions was authenticity in the workplace, the wealth gap. We have very candid, safe place discussions about topics that help us to coach the employees and navigate, no matter where they are in the country, these different issues and how they can show up and be great in their respective engagement or workspace. So that's been a big plus, and we actually follow their careers and keep in touch with them beyond the monthly meetings. From a experience and retention perspective, I have 7 direct reports, and one of the ways I have to help them and make sure they're mastering their competencies and their career path, and also identifying other ways to expose them to capabilities they need. For example, if I have someone who should be up for manager in a year and they don't have P&L experience within their engagement, I'll give them exposure on another engagement to get that experience and learn to master the skills they need to manage finances as well as operate in their specific area of strength. And I mentioned the transparency and accountability. I do encourage you to look at the report, Google it, that I put in the chat, and just follow us from year to year to see how we're progressing in this area.
So there's a lively discussion on this, and also like what are good practices and how people are sharing ranges, and it's kind of fascinating. You guys, I've heard a lot from KPMG, and you're very concerned about doing this the right way. And as to the point of the chat, you can game it. You can make very big salary ranges that are meaningless. Another thing you could do is find factors that are meaningless. You should have factors that predict what the job, what would make sense for people to have different pay ratios. You could game that. There are ways to goose the system, but I think KPMG exemplifies a corporation that really is trying to do the right things. It's not about checking the box, but it's attracting talent. And your competitors are also focused on that, and it becomes a competitive, advantage. If you don't do this, you sort of fall behind. So, and as an accounting firm, you would hope you would do the right thing. So it's great to hear you doing it. Let's take some questions, or because we have very little time, and I just want to make sure we address the audience and let them have a chance to chat. There was a question on whether it's more important to focus on promotion rates or pay, and I would say, why choose? You do have to promote people, and you do have to pay them fairly. I mean, it's one or the other. If everyone bumps up your job title and doesn't give you the responsibility and the pay you need, I think that's a big problem. I mean, how do you folks feel? On the panel?
Yeah, I agree. It's not one size fit all or one thing that's going to fix any surveys that we take. I mean, pay is important and it's a major factor, but it's your total reward system, as Noreen alluded to earlier. I mean, okay, I have a pension, I have all of these other things. I get to help people with their careers. We get to tap into what's most important. From a social consciousness standpoint, there are other factors that we're finding new recruits want in addition to pay for their total rewards package and experience and career experience. So I think there are other factors, and we have 3 years ago, a chief culture officer, I think one of the first, the Big Four to implement or actually stand up a chief culture officer. And it's the culture that we want is embedded into everything. If you take a training, there's always some reminders of our values and our culture. And I actually see, even in performance reviews and ratings, where if someone is not living up to the culture, they could be doing everything right and standing for what we stand for. That person may not get promoted. They need to work on those values. So there is a broader aspect that I feel that is retaining talent beyond the pay, but the pay cannot go by the wayside. That has to be a major factor.
Yeah, it's true. And I think what you said about culture is very vital. Companies are looking at, a lot of companies are really getting into measuring intersectionality. And you can't do that unless you've created a certain amount of trust in the employees. There has to be a culture where people feel included. And when you ask for information, people supply it because they know why you're doing it. They know this is in the best interests of them and the firm. So, putting that all together as a piece, I think is really vitally important.
I think the plug on promotion in addition to pay is obviously we want to be in positions where compensation decisions are made. And, some of the biggest learnings that I work with a lot of women in big law firms and said, I get to a certain level and then I'm on the compensation committee and I'm like,
I've heard some of the in the finance world, and believe me, they can be ugly.
Yeah, finance law. And so, just making sure that there's incredible diversity in race, sex, and ethnicity in those decision-making bodies does wind up impacting the policies that affect all of us. And so I think clear pathways to promotion, and if that's and to higher pay, being trained, all of those things, making sure that people have access to the criteria that you say puts them higher on their on the salary scale. It's really it's the follow through on all of it. I think builds incredible goodwill, and sometimes the progress is a little slow, but if you're transparent about your process and really following through, and you're looking like everybody else in the workforce in terms of leadership, I think it can go a long way.
What we generally hear is that progress is slow, and when people do pay equity analysis, getting, the golden standard for disclosing your information on the web usually is 1 penny difference or less. And getting to that is glacial. That's what companies tell me. We can get rid of the big problems, but when we try to get it to perfection, it's glacial. And moving people up in the organization can be slow, but, it's no reason not to measure it and to share that, because the journey, that's part of the journey. Otherwise people don't know what's going on or whether you care at all. So I think perfection shouldn't drive out the good.
But there are some really quick policy changes that people can make. Do not rely on prior salary when setting hiring pay, and don't let the recruiters you use do that. It's against the law to ask that question in states like California, and I think you'll see that trend happening. Be transparent. Make sure that if you actually have pay scales, to Catherine, some of the things that Catherine's are saying in the chat, that you actually stick to it in the negotiation process too. And do those audits and say you're going to do it quarterly, and say there's going to be changes after those audits. Those 3 things any company could do right now. And our studies have shown they make a really big difference in overall pay equity and culture in organizations and companies.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add to the whole thing about not asking prior compensation is don't ask expectations, because that's another thing companies do. What are your expectations? And research has shown and results show that women's tend to be kind of gentle on their expectations, while the men are a lot bolder. And that ends up with men getting a lot bolder compensation, which is, not the way it should be. So it should be your compensation is based on what they think you're bringing to the table, not what they think is the best deal. Are there any other thoughts we want to share before this, or questions? Yeah, you're right, Christine. It is a hard. It's very hard to message this in general. I think the problem is the messaging is tough. If they have no goal, no career paths, no set review, no bonus time, well, that's a problem.
That's a major risk management problem.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
as a lawyer who's litigated pay cases all the way to the Supreme Court, I can tell you that.
Yes. It's the old ways, which some of us have lived through. They don't fly, and I think Noreen can speak to that very well. It's you are setting yourself up for some very awkward interactions, and the reputational damage of not having a clear and defined pay process. It's a business risk that is kind of bold to take in these environments. It really is. Okay, I think we are out of time. Really want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank all our panelists. Stephanie, Noreen, you did wonderful to have you here and get your insights. And
Great to be with both of you and all of you who joined us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We don't have any more time to wait for equal pay.
Go out there, fight for it. Take it easy. Bye now.
Know your worth.
Thank you.